She lay in a freezer for 18 years, and no one ever looked in the right place. June 2023, in the outskirts of Mobile, Alabama, a group of high school students exploring an abandoned meat processing plant, shut down and sealed since 2007, stumbled across a locked industrial freezer buried beneath rusted conveyor belts and piles of scrap metal when police arrived and forced it open. What they found inside was chilling a human body, strangely well-preserved, still wearing a social services uniform. Recovered ID records confirmed it was Angela Watts, one of 2 child welfare workers who vanished during their overnight shift on November 11th, 2005. The other, Shanice Rucker, has still never been found. Angela Watts was born in 1974, raised in the historically black neighborhood of Toulminville on Mobile's west side. Her grandmother had been the first black woman in the area to become an elementary school teacher. Her mother, Geraldine, worked as a cafeteria cook at the local high school. Angela grew up in a strict but loving home. Always deeply empathetic, she noticed everything: the classmate with bruises, the kid who never had lunch, the boy who flinched at loud voices. After graduating with a degree in social work from Alabama State University, Angela didn't pursue big city career paths. She came back home to Mobile. She believed communities like hers needed someone to fight for justice, to care for forgotten children in Toulminville. She wasn't just a social worker. She was a neighbor, a big sister, the woman who'd pull over mid-commute to ask a child if they'd had breakfast. Angela was a single mother to a 6-year-old girl named Camille at the time of her disappearance. She had split from Camille's father while pregnant, but never spoke bitterly about it. Camille, to Angela, was the reason she stayed committed to her work, because she refused to let her daughter grow up in the kind of broken system she had spent her life trying to fix. Neighbors still remember Camille's voice ringing through the morning air. "Mommy, wear the purple shirt today," and Angela laughing, briefcase in hand, darting out the door, in the days leading up to her disappearance. Angela had been working one of the most complicated cases of her career: 3 young siblings living in an abandoned house with an uncle suspected of abuse. She had filed urgent action requests multiple times, but red tape, understaffing, and bureaucratic apathy kept delaying any response. She had told a colleague, "If I don't go check on them tonight, I won't be able to sleep." It was November 11th, 2005. That was the last night Camille ever saw her mother. Shanice Rucker was Angela's colleague and the only person with her on that fateful night shift, born in 1981 in Pritchard, a gray zone suburb straddling poverty and neglect. Shanice came from a very different background. She was the 3rd of 4 siblings. Her father killed in a workplace accident, her mother working 2 jobs to survive. Shanice had always carried responsibility. She walked her siblings to school, counted coins for milk at the end of the month, stood between her mother and landlords during rent disputes. That upbringing forged a grit Angela relied on. Where Angela led with her heart, Shanice grounded them both. She could walk into the most harrowing scene and still remember to take notes, snap photos, file a report. They were opposites, but perfectly complementary. No need for words, just a glance, and they'd know what came next. Shanice had been working toward a degree in public administration, taking night classes. "I can't be in the field forever," she told Angela. "If we want to fix this system, we've got to be inside it," despite her toughness. Shanice had a soft spot for vulnerable children, especially young girls at risk of abuse. Once, when the shelter was full, she paid for a motel room herself for a teen mom and her 2 kids. No one knew. Angela only found the receipt stuffed deep in Shanice's bag. When asked, Shanice just said, "I'd do it, 'cause if I don't, who will?" On the night of November 11th, Shanice called Angela around 7 p.m., noticing she hadn't left the office yet. Angela told her she was heading to that house, the same one with the 3 siblings and the uncle. Shanice, as always, packed her essentials: a flashlight, bottled water, and snacks. "These kids are always hungry," she said, "and you never know what's waiting inside." Those were the last words anyone ever heard from her. Mobile in 2005 wasn't a big city, but its invisible dividing lines were painfully clear. White families lived in Midtown or near the East Bay. The West Side, where Angela and Shanice worked, was another world entirely. Potholes never got fixed, streetlights stayed out, and child abuse reports were often left untouched because they weren't urgent enough. But here among single mothers, grandmothers raising grandchildren, and uncles with grease-stained hands opening garages as safe havens, Angela and Shanice built something rare: trust. They didn't have much, but they had each other. Angela was known, but it was Shanice whom the community trusted most. She wasn't complicated, folks would say. She understood these kids because she was one of them. One story stands out. A 4-year-old girl found abandoned in an empty apartment refused to speak to anyone except Shanice. She sat on the floor, holding a ragged teddy bear, humming a lullaby. The little girl crawled into her lap and fell asleep. Her mother later said, "No one else could have done that." Shanice wasn't trying to be a hero. She just wanted that baby safe. On the morning of November 12th, when neither woman showed up to the team meeting, no one panicked. Field workers often worked overnight, especially during emergencies. But by noon, Angela's phone went straight to voicemail. Shanice wasn't answering her sister's texts. That's when the unease began to spread. A colleague remembered I called Camille's preschool, asked if her mom dropped her off. The little girl said, "Mommy said she was going to check on the kids. Mommy said she'd be back to read me a story." I put the phone down and my heart just dropped. Strangely, no one could say exactly where they had gone that night. No notes, no emails. No one recalled the address Angela mentioned in the last meeting. It was like someone had scrubbed a single square from the collective memory, and then life went on. New shifts, new reports. A week later, the missing persons files were filed. But when a local reporter asked, who was the last person to talk to them, the office fell silent. There's one thing even Angela's family never knew. She had visited that house once before, and she never told anyone what really happened the first time. The night of November 11th, 2005, the weather in Mobile was colder than usual. A light cold front swept through southwest Alabama, casting a gray, heavy stillness over the city, according to the official shift log from the city's Department of Child Protective Services. Angela and Shanice were scheduled to revisit a family flagged for prior abuse concerns, but the address entered into the system was incomplete. Surveillance footage from the agency's parking lot captured their final known movements at 8:42 p.m. Angela walked out wearing a thick gray coat, flashlight in hand, and her bulging case file slung over her shoulder. Shanice drove, her usual stash of surgical masks still in her bagage, precaution she took seriously, especially for children with weakened immune systems, according to later police reports. Their green 2003 Ford Escape was last seen at 9:15 p.m. by a delivery driver near Plateau Avenue and Rice Street, quiet area on the edge of a long abandoned industrial zone. The driver said the car was stopped in the middle of the road, hazard lights blinking, but when he turned back a few minutes later, it was gone. No cameras, no verified witnesses, just an odd sight that faded into the night. It wasn't until day 3 that the investigation began in earnest after Geraldine, Angela's mother, reported her missing. Camille, only 6 years old, kept asking, "Is Mommy working late like last time? Did she forget her phone again?" And then she fell silent when she heard her grandmother crying in the kitchen. An investigator later recalled Camille sitting in the back of the police station. Clutching her teddy bear, she kept looking at the door. Then asked me, "Can you tell Mommy I wore the purple shirt today?" The investigation stalled from the start. No blood, no abandoned car, no dropped belongings. Senior officers floated the theory that the two women left voluntarily, a claim that the community fiercely rejected. They don't understand. One single mother said on local news, Angela would never leave her baby. Shanice was prepping her management application, who vanishes during fiscal reporting season, but without hard evidence. The case was soon categorized as missing, circumstances unknown. The local paper's November 18th headline was stark. 2 social workers still missing. Police rule, nothing out. By day 4, worry turned into anger. In Toumanville, prayer circles formed outside elementary schools. Camille kept going to class, but stopped speaking to anyone. A teacher recalled she drew her mom standing at a door with her briefcase. When I asked, "What's she doing?" Camille said, "She's trying to come home." In Pritchard, Shanice's older sister, Monique, organized a volunteer search team. They canvassed abandoned homes, dry canals, holding posters of the women and a simple sign, If you saw anything at all, please say something. But within the mobile police department, things moved slowly and inconsistently. When asked why K-9 units weren't deployed, they said there was no defined scene. When families requested cell phone records, they were told to wait for court orders in week 2. A department spokesperson told the press that one of the women had a history of job-related stress. Geraldine nearly collapsed on live television. If my daughter had stress, it was from the job this city gave her. She worked 12-hour days. Sometimes she didn't even eat. Don't use that to say she wanted to disappear. As local media tried to stay neutral, rumor networks exploded. Some claimed the women had stumbled onto something too big. Others whispered Angela had been involved in a scandal with a city official, and this was personal fallout. No one had proof, but the silence from authorities only fueled the fire. One detail baffled everyone. Angela's mailbox still held mail from the week before, an unopened phone bill, and a hand-drawn postcard from Camille's kindergarten class. If she'd planned to run, why leave everything behind? And if someone hurt them, how did it leave no trace in a city as small as Mobile? The biggest question lingered. Why didn't anyone at the agency know where they were going that night? Internal audits later revealed Angela had written an address in her personal notebook, but that notebook was never found. Summer 2006-8. Months after the disappearance, a stormwater technician reported finding a damaged cell phone tangled in a drainage grate on the city's west side. The model matched the one Shanice used, a dark purple Motorola, common at the time. It had no SIM card. The casing had been pried open. Police logged it as evidence, but never disclosed the find, claiming the origin could not be confirmed. It wasn't until 2015, when investigative journalist Marcus Young reopened the timeline, that the phone's metadata was reanalyzed. It had last been charged at 9:56 p.m. on the night they vanished, almost 45 minutes after they left headquarters, in Young's words. If the phone was alive at 10 p.m., someone was still breathing, or someone else was erasing. One overlooked tip resurfaced to a statement from a homeless man living near the industrial zone. He'd reported hearing screeching brakes and loud arguing around that same time. Police dismissed it that was intoxicated. But in 2019, after public petitions pushed for a case review, that same testimony was compared to archived weather data. That night, wind gusts strong enough to echo down the hollow warehouse corridors. The man had told the truth. Had there been a struggle? A third person in the car, a trap waiting in the dark. Late 2022, a power grid technician discovered a sealed basement hatch beneath stacked crates in the now redeveloped industrial zone. The smell inside was strange enough to prompt a call to authorities. In the damp, concrete basement, investigators found remnants, children's toys, medical face masks, a gray coat on the floor, a dark, faded stain. Lab tests later confirmed human blood, but not Angela's, not Shanice's. Then came June 2023, a group of teens exploring a defunct meat processing plant just 300 meters from the basement. Sight pried open a locked industrial freezer. Inside was Angela, her body preserved by the cold, her gray coat still intact, her key ring still clipped to her waistband. No phone, no wallet, no sign of Shanice. Once again, the same questions returned louder than ever. If Angela was murdered, who did it and why? And if Shanice wasn't there, where did she go? When Angela's body was identified in June 2023, many believed the case would finally be solved. Instead, the physical evidence brought forth a web of contradictions that remain unsolved. First, former supervisor Harvey Bennett, who oversaw the mobile social services region in 2005, gave a startling testimony in a re-interview with current investigators. He said that afternoon, he saw Angela and Shanice arguing in the agency parking lot, not loudly, but unmistakably tense. Angela handed Shanice a stack of files and said something like, "You don't understand the full picture," Shanice replied irritably. "If you just follow your heart like that, you'll ruin us both." This testimony shook everyone. It contradicted everything known about their relationship. Why would they fight on their last day? Harvey said he hadn't reported it back then because he thought it was just a work dispute and that their disappearance was unforeseen. But he added, "After I saw Angela's coat, I couldn't stay silent." Second, Gerald Macklin, a small HVAC repairman near the abandoned industrial area, said he saw the green SUV parked at a three-way intersection that night, its lights blinking, and it stayed for hours, though he assumed it belonged to a night shift worker. He confirmed the license plate when shown later. He also remembered a dent on the rear, matching Shanice's vehicle, which had a repair a few weeks before the disappearance. His testimony led police to the location he described. There, they discovered a deep pit covered with sheet metal and overgrown branches. Inside lay the SUV, crushed and unrecognizable on the outside. But inside, mud and medical bandages stained with blood were found under the driver's seat. DNA analysis showed the blood did not match Angela or Shanice. This was the second time non-victim blood was found at a relevant site, raising the question, was there a third person injured or involved? That night, third, Odessa Kirkland, now in her 70s, had been a part-time custodian at the social services building in 2005. She contacted authorities after hearing news about Angela's remains. She recalled an incident just weeks before their disappearance. One night, was cleaning on the third floor and saw Ms. Watts in the conference room, alone, with no lights, just streetlight filtering through. I heard her crying. Though she didn't recall precisely what Angela said, she remembered one phrase: "I can't forgive him, but I can't stay silent either." Investigators matched this to a red ink note in Angela's personal notebook, the only one found in old agency storage. It read, "If I disappear." Begin with case files 432 and 433. Something's very wrong. Yet files 432 and 433 were blank, no names, only a stamp marked withdrawn. The records clerk responsible retired in 2007, unreachable now. A call brought only a sigh. I knew it'd be asked about this someday. Fourth, Monique, Shanice's older sister, via a lawyer, revealed a secret the family had kept only a week before vanishing. Shanice had mentioned being followed by an unfamiliar car on her way home. She had told the family, "They know what I'm looking into. I'm sure of it." When urged to report it, she replied, "I already did, but someone on the inside is leaking info. If I go missing, don't trust anyone in uniform." At the time, it sounded like anxiety. Now it reads like a warning. For the first time in 18 years, investigators seriously began to consider that the disappearances weren't accidents or runaway incidents, but something far larger: erased documents, forgotten testimonies, blood that didn't belong to the victims. A truth being buried, but not deep enough to never surface. Then, a new source emerged from outside official channels: Malik Dawson, the former warehouse manager at the meat processing plant where Angela's body was found, fired in 2006 for non-cooperation. Malik admitted he'd refused to share employee records and security footage during the original investigation, believing investigators were biased and uninterested in facts. Now aged and battling cancer, Malik reached out to the new team via his granddaughter over a 3-hour interview. He revealed that in October 2005, just weeks before their disappearance, Angela had visited the plant in pursuit of temporary worker Clarence Boone, the uncle of the 3 children she was checking on. Malik said Angela pinpointed Clarence's shifts, asked who interacted with him during breaks, and inquired if any complaints had been filed against him. What stayed with Malik was Angela's courage. She wasn't one to sugarcoat things. She looked me in the eye and asked, "If children in that house are going hungry every day under that man, what would you do?" Malik fell silent, not out of ignorance, but out of fear that she was right. 2 days later, he got a call from someone at the Department of Health, a female voice, cold and threatening, ordering him to stop sharing any information related to Clarence Boone. After that, Malik quietly deleted Clarence's record and disabled all security cameras in that region. "I'm not proud of it, but I've got a wife, kids. I'm no hero." Malik's account provided the first confirmation that Angela was not missing by mistake or choice. She had been investigating something or someone the system did not want exposed, and chillingly, those obstructing her weren't street criminals, but people within the system she trusted. At the same time, records show that Clarence Boone disappeared after 2006, but in 2009, his fingerprints appeared in Mississippi under the name Cornell Bishop. Registered in a town near the Pascagoula River, these revelations reignited the investigation. A hidden case file, an altercation in the parking lot, a crushed SUV, unknown blood, a terrified presence in the files, a woman followed, a restraining call, and a man who erased everything for fear. All signs point toward a deeply buried conspiracy, one that hid within systems Angela believed in. But who does it protect, and why is Clarence Boone Bishop a witness, a victim, or something else for the first time? Answers don't just seem possible, they demand to be found, and the search for justice has only just begun. Cornell Bishop, a name born from forged records, a life rebuilt in another state, finally surfaced after nearly 2 decades in the dark, once known as Clarence Boone. The man who appeared in Angela Watts' old case files had reemerged. But when investigators arrived at his listed address in Mississippi, they didn't find a man in hiding. Instead, they found someone stepping out of a local church, holding boxes of food for a weekend outreach program. He introduced himself as Cornell, a volunteer with a re-entry organization for formerly incarcerated men. When asked directly, he insisted he'd never been to Alabama, had never heard the name Angela Watts, but when shown a faded 2005 photo of Clarence Boone, taken at the meat plant in Mobile, his eyes flinched. Days later, his attorney issued a statement. "My client had a different identity decades ago, but he has lived honestly for over 15 years. He has no knowledge of the case you're referring to." That cautious tone raised red flags. A hair sample collected from his home was sent for DNA testing. The results were a shock. It matched the blood found on a medical bandage inside Angela's SUV. Clarence had been inside that car the night she disappeared, but if so, why were there no signs of a struggle? Angela's remains showed no defensive wounds. Could Clarence have been hurt? And Angela tried to help him in her private notebook. Angela once wrote, "Hez following orders. Hez afraid to speak, but he won't resist either." It was now clear Clarence may not have been the threat. Someone else was pulling the strings. The turning point came when a young investigator named Janelle Wright discovered a mislabeled box in the Montgomery archives transferred years ago when the old Child Services office shut down. Inside was a weathered envelope marked "Open Only in Emergency AW." It contained a small leather notebook and a purple ink pen, Angela's trademark, used for the things she didn't trust official systems to protect. The early pages detailed unreturned reports about Clarence Boone. "Shanice doesn't know everything," she wrote. "I'm afraid to tell her. Afraid they'll come for us both. But I can't look the other way." As the entries went on, the tone shifted from documentation to confession. Angela feared she was being watched. She noted a car near Camille's school. On page 32, she scrawled, "He knows I found it. I saw his car outside Camille's school. I have to end this or walk away. But walking away means leaving those kids. I can't." Then came the final entry. "If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. Don't blame Shanice. She didn't know I went back alone that Monday night." It suggested a disturbing possibility Angela may have returned to the site alone, after they had both safely left. And Shanice, who had vanished alongside her, might not have been with her at all during the final moments, just weeks after Angela's notebook was admitted as key evidence. A woman walked into the Mobile police station. Her face was hesitant, her voice uncertain. She wasn't there to file a complaint. She came with a question: "Are you looking for Shanice Rucker?" The woman was Teresa Coleman, a former nurse at Haven House Rehabilitation Center in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. She described a patient who'd been admitted in 2007, no name, no documents, nonverbal. Staff had labeled her Jane 43. But Teresa never forgot one night in 2014 when she saw the woman fixated on a newspaper clipping about Angela and Shanice's disappearance. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just stared at the photo, drew a sunflower on a napkin, and bit her nails until they bled. DNA tests later confirmed it. Jane 43 was Shanice Rucker. She had been alive all this time, living in a silent, broken space where memory either couldn't return her or wasn't safe to recall. When investigators first met her, they showed her photos: Angela, Camille, the SUV. Shanice didn't react until they placed a purple pen on the table. Her hand trembled. Then, slowly, she drew a circle and a single line through it clean. Deliberate. A symbol that meant something. To Angela. To her. To their story. In therapy. Fragments of memory began to surface. A dark room. Someone pleading. A woman voice shouting, "I told you not to go back there alone." Still, the memories were fogged, faces missing, time blurred. She couldn't recall the date, but she could write one word left-handed, even though she was right-handed Gerald. It was a name that had never appeared in official files, but for long-time mobile residents. It rang a chilling bell. Gerald had once worked night security at the meat plant where Angela's body was found. His personnel file was deleted in 2006, reason no longer active. This was no longer just a story about two women who vanished. It was about a system that made them disappear each in different ways. One was murdered, one was erased from her own memory, and both had tried, in the only ways they could, to leave a message, to warn us, to speak. And now, the only question that matters, are we finally ready to hear them? Discovering that Shanice Rucker was still alive, albeit unable to fully communicate, sent shockwaves through the investigation. What had once seemed clear now, blurred suspects became victims, and simple certainties unraveled into layers of complexity. If Shanice fled, why would she leave behind her best friend, that 6-year-old daughter, and everything else in her life? If Clarence Boone wasn't the killer, why was his DNA in that SUV? And if Angela knowingly faced danger, why did she go back alone? Detectives revisited a hypothesis once dismissed. Perhaps Angela and Shanice weren't victims of the same scenario. Perhaps Angela entered a trap voluntarily, convinced she could manage it. Perhaps Shanice suspected something, but not enough to stop her friend. And Clarence. Maybe he wasn't orchestrating events, but a pawn, discarded the moment he'd served his role. Investigators reopened a disturbing path tangent to Angela's mission, exposing child abuse within the very system she worked for. Her notebook repeatedly referenced kids logged but not checked, cases closed before action taken, calls disappearing from internal lines. These weren't typos, they were deliberate erasures. Then the name emerged, Gerald Teague, former internal security chief for Mobile's Child Service Department from 2004-2006. He'd been silent for nearly 20 years, but every system login, deletion of case files, an odd log entry pointed back to him. He even held access credentials to files 432 and 433, the same files Angela referred to as withdrawn. No arrest warrant yet, but internal surveillance launched at Gerald's old Atlanta residence. Investigators found a darkened, empty apartment and return mail piling up. Among the clutter was a 2011 letter. Handwritten, "Don't let her die in vain." Inside were only a black and white photograph and a scrawled caption she knew from the start. The room bore an uncanny resemblance to the basement where Angela's coat was found, old emergency storage chamber, intended to be locked from the outside. This suggested not a random murder, but captivity interrogation, a decision by someone else. And Angela's well-preserved body fits. The freezer was likely a final hiding place, not the murder site. Tucked beneath the photo was a small audio cassette typical of early 2000s handheld recorders. The tape revealed no confession, just static, a ringing phone, and a rhythmic click-click of keys turning. A forensic specialist decoded the clicks using binary conversion 111105. The date of disappearance. Was it Angela's final message, a twisted breadcrumb from Gerald, a threat encoded amid this? Trust shattered not just in institutions, but even among loved ones. Camille, now 24, withdrew entirely. She declined media, severed communication with police, and in a letter to lead investigator Janelle Wright, wrote, "I don't know what is true anymore. Did Mom really go back alone if Shanice is alive? Why was she missing for 18 years? I don't trust my memories anymore." Her letter ended with a heartbreaking question. If the truth only causes pain, is it worth knowing? That question echoed through the rest of the investigation. Each new evidence, not less confusing, but more agonizing: the photo, the audio cassette, Camille's childlike painting. Then, from the abandoned service building where Angela once worked, a child's watercolor resurfaced during demolition. Among dozens of innocent drawings, there was one with no name depicting a white freezer in an empty room, a figure wearing a hat, drawing a purple heart crossed out in black. Camille couldn't have known about the freezer or the pinoneless shed seen them. Psychologists concluded that this wasn't imagination, it was visual memory, a snapshot of trauma a child couldn't vocalize, but could paint. If Camille witnessed something, even through indirect exposure, the trauma remains far too heavy to articulate. That painting cut the investigation to its core. Lead investigator Janelle Wright wrote in her notes, "Am no longer sure who is victim, suspect, or witness. But worst of all, we let this happen. A black woman, a single mother, who may have been right, acted and died, believing someone would listen." That child's watercolor, without a shred of physical evidence, became the most powerful clue of the entire case, a single, silent scream from a 6-year-old. And in that moment, the investigation paused to look at itself and ask, are we truly listening? In July 2024, Camille Watts left Alabama. No press conference, no interviews. She moved to Chicago, enrolled in a children's art therapy program, and cut all ties to the case, a close friend said. Camille no longer believes in justice the way her mother did, but she still believes in healing, even if it comes too late. Shanice Rucker remained at the rehabilitation center in Mississippi, drifting between dreams and fragments of memory. She no longer panicked, but she couldn't fully recall either. Every time she saw a purple marker, she'd draw endless circles. The investigators stopped asking questions. They understood Shanice's survival was its own kind of silent protest and a testimony without words. Clarence Boonenow, known as Cornell Bishop, was never charged. No direct evidence linked him to Angela's death, yet his name remained on a federal watch list. As for Gerald Teague, the man who once held keys to every door in the system, he was never found. Some believe he's dead, others think he was protected, but no one could explain how every trace of him vanished after 2006, as if he'd never existed at all. The case was officially labeled insufficient evidence to prosecute, but not closed, in the final report. The investigative team wrote, "We cannot name Angela Watts' killer, but we can say this silence, bureaucracy, and the fragmented failures of the system allowed the crime to happen and continue." A small memorial was held in Mobile, on the grounds of the former Child Welfare Office. A stone plaque was placed there, etched with the words, "For those who spoke up and were never heard." Beneath it were Angela's name, and those of over 20 children, listed as pending verification in 2005 cases closed without cause. When the final excavator peeled back the rusted metal sheet from the patch of dirt where the freezer once stood, a worker found a torn piece of paper. On it, a hand was sketched, reaching out of a box. No one knows who drew it, but someone folded it carefully, pressing it flat beneath the soil, as if to leave a final message: I was here, I was really here, and that's how it ends. No courtroom, no verdict, just memory, and a community left to live with the question, what if we had believed them sooner? Perhaps there will never be a single answer. No one can say for certain what really happened on the night of November 11th, 2005, or in the months that followed, as everything was quietly erased, buried, and blurred by time. Angela Watts, a black woman, a single mother, an unremarkable caseworker, vanished inside a system she once believed she could fix. Shanice Rucker, a colleague. A friend might be a witness, a survivor, or just another casualty of silence. Clarence Boone, a pawn, or a mask. Gerald Teague, the mastermind, or the face of something bigger, something invisible, something called unchecked power. And Camille, a child who lost her mother at 6. She grew up not just grieving, but burdened by a feeling that everyone around her was waiting for her to remember something. The truth became not a release, but a weight. This isn't just a story about a disappearance. It's a reminder that someone once tried to speak, tried to knock on doors, tried to file reports, to make phone calls, to write in purple ink on her last remaining pages. And then she vanished. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right too early and too alone. So now the question remains, what really happened? Only you can answer that, not with words, but in how you choose to listen to the silence that follows this story.